Hey everyone, my name's Tim, and this episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Riverside. And since today's episode is about photography, I wanted to take just a few moments to show you how to use Riverside's editing features to incorporate images to your podcast or video content. Let's check it out. There are a number of reasons why you might want to use an image in your video content. For example, maybe you want to use it to show a location that you've been to or something that you saw. Or perhaps you want to use a graphic to support the discussion of something that would be difficult to explain verbally. To do this, you just pull up the timeline in the Riverside studio, and then you go to the part of the conversation where you want to add the image. You click on that and you go over to images, and then you can just go and upload and select the image that you want to add to the timeline. Click on that, and then you simply adjust the size and location of the image on the screen. And you can also determine how long you want the image to appear on the screen. And after that, you're good to completely edit and export the video. It's super intuitive and easy to do, even if you don't have a lot of experience with video editing. You can try it out using the link in my description and put in the code MyTogBlog for a 15% discount. Now, on to the show. If you want to learn the key to taking better photos, then today's episode is for you. My guest today is Ralph Velasco. He is a professional travel photographer and tour organizer who has been a guest speaker at the New York Times travel show, the Professional Photographers Association of America, the Apple Store, and other major venues. He's also organized and led more than 120 multi-week international tours to places like Vietnam, Antarctica, Portugal, Spain, Cambodia, and many other destinations. In addition to that, he has a YouTube channel with more than 2,000 subscribers, and he's the author of several travel books, including a 3-in-1 book about how to be an intentional, mindful international traveler. In today's episode, we talk about how Ralph made the transition from the corporate world to being a full-time travel photographer and tour organizer, how he manages all his different business ventures. And he also shares a tip that took me a while to learn as a photographer, but that once I got the hold of it, it really made a big difference in the quality of my photography. And if you're also into photography, this is a great thing to learn about or to be reminded about, even if you've been doing this for a while. It really applies to everyone. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Hey, Ralph, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Great to be here.
Thank you very much for coming on. I'm really excited to talk about photography and all of the stuff that you're doing. Maybe you could start just by telling us a little bit about how you got into travel photography and content creation.
Yeah, so I've been a traveler for many, many years since high school, and I studied in Spain for a summer. The next summer, I was a volunteer in Peru. The following summer, I was a volunteer in Venezuela. The following summer, I studied in Mexico City. So I've been traveling quite a bit since I was fairly young. And so always enjoyed photography and travel. But way back then, it was like becoming an astronaut or a rock star to think about actually making a living from travel and photography. It was something that I decided that I was going to pursue.
So, are you glad that you made the switch in your career to go into photography and travel?
Yeah, it was the best thing I ever did. Only took me 45 years to figure it out. Most people never do. I consider myself
Right.
lucky and that it didn't take longer. But yeah, it was one of the best things I ever did. Sort of a perfect storm. Digital photography was just a dawn back in the early 2000s. We had the internet, social media was starting to come out. So it was all
Right.
these different things that allowed me to be able to do this. I wouldn't have been able to do that just like 3 or 5 years earlier.
Yeah, big changes. And it's quite interesting how it created a lot of new opportunities for people like yourself. I think a lot of photographers kind of lamented the rise of social media and film photography kind of going away, but it has really opened things up to a lot more people. So, what are some of the most awesome places you've traveled, and what did you like about those places?
One of the most amazing places that I just got to about 6 months ago was Antarctica. And that was my seventh continent. I had a trip going there and had a really nice group. And with this particular trip, we actually fly down to the
Mhm.
continent, so we don't take the Drake Passage, the ship, which is notoriously rough.
Right.
I actually had someone on this trip that flew down with me, and it was his second attempt to get to Antarctica
Mm.
because on his first attempt, someone actually died on his
Oh my
ship
goodness.
because the seas were so rough crossing the
Uh,
Drake Passage. So he came down with me. He says, I'm flying
mhm.
down this time.
Nah.
We fly down to Punta Arenas, Chile, and then we start the trip from there where the
Mhm.
company's based. And then we fly down in less than 2 hours. We're on the ship, smallest in the industry,
Mm.
only 67 passengers.
Wow.
And what's nice about that is it allows you to get into a lot smaller bay places that the other bigger ships can't get into.
Right.
There's a treaty down there now that only 100 people or less can get
Mm.
off one landing. So our entire ship was able to get off where other ships might not be able to get off at all. So that's quite an advantage. And then we spent 5 nights on the ship down there. But what really impressed me about it was the tranquility and
Mhm.
the silence and the natural world. I don't know what I
Mm.
expected, but I was just like, there's not an airplane
Yeah.
contrail or a fence or any man-made objects anywhere except for the ship. Otherwise, it's just pure pristine beauty, and it was absolutely
Right.
fantastic.
Sounds amazing. So, what advice would you have for people who are beginners who are thinking about getting into travel photography?
Well, it's extremely saturated these days, no doubt about
Mhm.
it, but there are ways to get in, niches that people can find, different
All right.
types of specialties. I'm often asked, what's a travel photographer? And
Mhm.
to me, it's a person that is a jack of all genres, meaning that you've got architecture photographers and
Mhm.
people photographers, landscape photographers, but a
Right.
travel photographer kind of has to be a little bit of all those things
Mhm.
if you want to tell the story of the place and bring back pictures that really
Right.
capture the essence of the place and tell its story, which is my goal on every trip that I am. It's not to
Mhm.
just take one particular type of picture, but to create a variety that tells an interesting story of the place.
Right. And I imagine that must be key, especially with travel photography, because you're going to so many different locations that would have different things you'd want to profile.
Yeah, each place has its own type of food and money and architecture and different people, its traditions. And so trying to capture those things of each place is my goal on every trip.
Mhm. How about for people like from the perspective of being customers on one of your excursions? What kind of things should they prepare for when they're taking up their first travel photography trip?
Yeah, it's about having the right equipment, although now these smartphones in our pockets are so
Mhm.
powerful that we can get some great shots and
Mhm.
also video, time lapse, slow motion, sound, other wonderful features that these phones have that our cameras don't necessarily or not
Mhm.
easy. So I think the smartphone is the best
Hmm.
device today. It's always with us. I'm shooting with it more than ever, especially because I'm doing more video for my YouTube channel and other
Mhm.
things, marketing and such. So I knew I wanted to make it easy on myself. So I wanted just like a gimbal that I could slip my
Right.
phone into, easy microphone and headsets, for sound, because you got to have good sound.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to have to carry a whole nother device and
Right.
gear and stuff. So that's what made it work for me.
I could see that, especially with travel photography. You don't want to be lugging like 5 lenses and 2 cameras. How about if, the person's spouse is not into photography per se, will they still get a lot of value out of these trips? Like, is there still stuff for them to do?
Yeah, great question. And absolutely. On a regular photo workshop, probably not.
Mhm.
But I don't run photo workshops. I've ran them before. They're very difficult to run like 10 or 12 times a year, which is what I run my
Yeah.
trips. Because you're talking sunrises, sunsets, imagery,
Right.
photo walks, and one-on-ones, a lot of work. So I've tried to make my trips not a photo workshop,
Mhm.
but not just a regular trip either, some sort of a hybrid. So
That
there's
makes
something
sense.
for everyone.
That makes sense.
Even if you're not a photographer, who doesn't want to be in beautiful lights? And when there's fewer crowds and, the light is
Hmm.
full and it's the locals and not the tourist crowd.
Yeah, for sure. And then what are some tips for capturing good travel photos?
Well, I try to keep my tips very basic so anyone can benefit from them with any type of camera. And
Mhm.
one of my biggest tips and one of the easiest to think about is just being aware of your backgrounds
Hmm.
and being aware of what's going on behind and in front of the subject
Right.
as you're photographing it or them. And, sometimes we get so focused on the subject,
Right.
we forget what's happening behind them and how that might affect the picture. And we've
Hmm.
all gone back to pictures later and said, "Oh my God,
Yes.
how did I not see that tree branch coming out of their head or something else so obvious in hindsight?" But while we're standing there, maybe we're a little nervous or we're rushed. So we take the photo very quickly. And then we realize later that with a
Right.
simple step to the left or right or up or
Yeah,
down, asking the person to move, we could have avoided that major mistake.
that's great. Yeah, I heard that our feet is one of our most important pieces of photography equipment.
That's right.
Just
Yeah.
can make such a difference in where you're positioned versus the person can create, like you say, a whole different vibe to a photo.
Yeah. Ansel Adams says good photography is about knowing where to stand.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think AI might affect travel photography?
Digital photography obviously affected photography a lot because we
Hmm.
all became some sort of a photographer.
Hmm.
Now we can all manipulate photographs very easily right on our phones. That's another
Right.
benefit of the phone. You've got these different ways to share and to edit and to
Hmm.
create movies and all kinds of things. These phones that are in our pocket are so powerful and allow us
Hmm.
to do so much so quickly that I don't see any reason to go back to the Micro Four Thirds or the
All right.
mirrorless cameras or certainly the DSLRs.
Hmm.
There's always a trade-off. These smartphones are probably never going to be quite as,
All right.
good as the main big boy cameras, but I think there's a trade-off and it's well worth that trade-off.
Yeah, it's interesting that a lot of phone apps now you can get the pro camera apps where you can actually simulate manual mode settings within the app. So yeah, you can certainly do a lot.
They're getting better
Very
all the time.
useful. And I think the other thing about travel photography and how it's kind of insulated from AI to some extent because so much of it is about the experience as opposed to just an image itself.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. As far as AI goes, it's incredible what we can do already at this point and what's
Hmm.
going to be possible in the near future. It's pretty incredible. So we're just going to have to decide what we're going to stand for. When it came to stock photography, which was a
Hmm.
big thing, I'd say like 15, 20 years ago, the bottom's fallen out of that
Yeah.
because of smartphone photography and the ease of editing. Now everyone got a decent picture. We may not want to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars for that perfect picture, but tens of dollars might be just sufficient for
Yeah.
that brochure or whatever stuff we're buying. So I think our level of, thinking of what's good photography, the bar is going down
Hmm.
a little bit.
It's true across a lot of categories of content creation. I was looking through your site and it seems like you're into a range of different things. How do you balance it all? How do you keep it all going?
I try to pepper in things that I'm interested in more. I enjoy the podcasting part of it and
Yeah.
the video, photography, the travel, of course. And it all works together,
Hmm.
right? These are all things that work in concert with each other.
Yeah. I saw too, you have a travel affirmations book that's come out. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, as a photographer, we're kind of the worst when it comes to being present when we
Hmm.
travel. We end up going to these amazing places and seeing them through the viewfinder of a camera. So we're constantly looking through the back of a camera and experiencing this place the more I travel, and I'm lucky to travel quite a bit every year, the more I'm interested in just slowing down
Mm.
and really taking in a place, just sitting in a pub, having a
Right.
beer, or in a cafe, watching the world go by. To
Mhm.
me, that's travel. It's not trying to tick every
Right.
bucket list item off or see everything. It's about experiencing the place truly. And I often come back from these amazing trips and I'm
Mhm.
like, was I really there? I've got the pictures and the video to
Mhm.
prove it. I was physically there, but was I mentally there?
Mhm.
And so I'm learning to appreciate more and more the idea of just stopping,
Mhm.
looking around, listening, feeling, touching, seeing, hearing the place and
Mhm.
absorbing it that way. And that's the idea of the travel affirmations, the gratitudes book that I came up
Right.
with. To tell a quick story, when I was in high school, I was a volunteer in Peru,
Mhm.
and we were 16-year-old boys from my high school. It's an all boys high school. We were kind of moaning a little bit after a while about, missing our mother's cooking
Right.
and our own beds and our friends and family back home. Because here we were on the other side of the world in this very different place.
Mhm.
And one of the proctors on the trip, he said, be here now.
Mhm.
Make an effort to be here now. Take advantage of this incredible
Right.
opportunity that you have to be in this strange place, to learn all these different traditions and cultures and food and things,
Mhm.
and and make the best of that. And I always thought that was such great advice and something I never really forgot, but it's something that I did get away from now and then. The
Right.
more I traveled, the more I was just kind of touching the surface, and I wanted to get away from that. So that's why I wrote these
Mm.
books for myself, to be more present and not to be not really physically there, I guess.
And I imagine it leads to better photography too when you're more present. Cer
Absolutely. Good
Certainly
point.
experienced that on a smaller scale with my photo drives in the local area. If I'm trying to race from one location to the next to get that next photo and you think, oh, there's a better photo just one town over, you're not seeing things. And it's when you slow down and take your time, that's when the better photos emerge, the things that aren't obvious to us when we're, as you say, trying to rush around or we're trying to check boxes like what are the photos I need on this trip.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt
Bless
about
you.
it.
So what's your process for deciding if you're going to say yes or no to new opportunities? With your YouTube channel and travel business, you must get options to do different things. And, as content creators get more traction, they're faced with this decision. Like suddenly you can't say yes to everything anymore because there's too many things. So how do you decide what's a yes and what's a no?
Yeah, it's tough because as someone who's self-employed, you're constantly worried about where the next
Hmm.
check is going to come from.
Right.
So you want to take everything,
Hmm.
but I think after a while you realize you can't do everything, certainly can't do it well. So you have to pick and choose. And sometimes that's very difficult to say no to what
Right.
could be good money, but maybe isn't taking you in the right direction. It's more of a short-term thing.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of how things fit in to my
Hmm.
long-term vision for me and my business,
Yeah.
where I want to be. And so that's how I really try to determine what I'm going to say yes or no to, is how does
Yeah.
it fit into my long-term plan?
Such great advice, I think. A lot of times when creators start out, they don't necessarily have that long-term plan except in the most nebulous kind of way. And I think the sooner we can develop, you know, where is it that we're going, figure that out, and then you can almost use it to work backwards to figure out what makes sense and what doesn't. So where would you like the business to be like in the next 5 years?
Yeah. So I have had several brands over the years. I
Mm-hmm.
started out as Ralph Velasco photography, realized that was making the business too much about me. And if I ever
Hmm.
want to sell or hire other people, that might make it difficult.
Right.
So I changed the name to photo enrichment programs.
Hmm.
Then I had photo enrichment adventures, Ala
Mm.
Kamani experiences. But I always had Continental Drifter. And so I wanted to bring everything under Continental Drifter
Right.
umbrella. And I finally had an opportunity to do that last year. I got rid of the other two websites, all the other
Hmm.
social media, trying to simplify my life, but also
Right.
make it easier for people to not be confused by all these
Yeah.
different brands and what's he trying to do.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm doing with this new series of books, which I call the Mindful and Intentional Traveler
Hmm.
series, is to bring people back to present, to make them more
Right.
mindful travelers and to learn the benefit of that idea.
Hmm.
Because we go to these places and want to see and do everything. But in the end, did we do anything? The idea is to slow down, absorb the place more intentionally, and get a lot more out of your trip than you probably would have otherwise. So you're getting more bang for the buck. So what I'd like to do is with these books, and I've got several ideas for other books in
Hmm.
the series. I've got one for meditations for
Hmm.
travel and some other ideas. What I want to do is create some retreats around these. Right now I create tours and experiences that, bring people, say, to an 11th century castle in
Hmm.
South France, and then we go see all the nearby villages.
Hmm.
We'll do some journaling and exercises and learn how to be
Right.
more mindful and intentional travelers. And then we go into the local
Mm.
villages and put that to practice. So that's the idea of what I have planned for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, it's great the way it all fits together. What you're doing is aligned. And I think that's so important for creators to figure out how to bring it all together. So that sounds exciting. I just had one follow-up question about that. Are you going the self-publishing route, or had you considered using a more traditional publisher for any of those?
Yeah, I've gone the self-publishing route. It just allows me to be in more control,
Hmm.
get things out a lot faster. And, it can take a couple of years to get a
Yeah,
self-published or traditionally published book out. And
that's
by
right.
that time, the way things are changing, that subject could be gone. So I think that self-publishing is much more quick and it's
Mhm.
just as great. You can get in front of just as many people with Amazon.
Yeah,
So I've really enjoyed the self-publishing route.
good. Yeah, and I guess it lets you more adapt those to your specific trips that you're doing and things like that too.
You're so much more in control of everything.
So, how do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your content or your services?
Sure. So people can go to continentaldrifter.co
Hmm.
and find everything there from my podcast to my experiences, blog posts, things I'm selling, like my books and different merchandise that I have there. But everything's under continentaldrifter.co. I've also got my YouTube channel,
Hmm.
youtube.com/continental drifter. Got a lot of my past
Yeah,
trips there. I hope to come up with a mindful and intentional podcast and
right.
some other ancillary products and services for the Mindful and Intentional Traveler series too.
This sounds exciting. Thank you very much, Ralph. I really appreciate that you spending some time with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Tim. This is great.
So, talking with Ralph, one of my big takeaways from today's episode is just the importance of slowing down. And I can't tell you how many times as a photographer that I would be at a site and, feel that pressure of the fact that you're only there for a limited amount of time. So, you're trying to focus on taking a large volume of pictures in the hopes that, some of these photos are going to turn out really well, when really what we often need to do in these situations is slow it down a bit, really observe the world, really get into that flow state of creativity where we can apply, our unique perspective and really think about the photos that we're taking. That's what ultimately is going to make the difference and help us come up with better results rather than, frantically running around trying to snap photos every few minutes and just, as I said, producing a large volume of photos that are, okay to mediocre. And occasionally you get lucky and hit some good ones. But, the best results really come from being more mindful about what we're doing. And I think this applies also to social media in many ways. There is often this algorithmic pressure to produce more and more content and do it on a consistent basis so that consistency almost becomes more important than quality. Whereas if we again just pulled it back and slowed down a bit, put a little bit more thought into each post, we can produce much better results. And that's not to say we should let, perfectionism take over, because that's the other side of this, that if you're always trying to be, too perfect, that could work against you in another way. So it is about kind of striking that balance. But my experience is that most of us are pushing too hard on the other side, where we're trying to create a lot of volume in order to, feed the machine, as it were. And more, especially now when there's more and more competition out there, more and more content, volume is not necessarily the best way to compete. The way to stand out is to produce better quality. You can even apply this to comments on other people's posts on social media. Just rushing through and leaving, generic comments is going to produce a lot worse results than really putting thought and trying to add value, and build relationships with other creators, with potential customers, or with whoever you're interacting with. So I think that's a great thing to take away from this episode. I hope you found it helpful. If you want to see more content about photography, check out one of these next videos here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.